Hello guys, good morning, good afternoon and good evening depending on where you are watching from. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, let's take a look on how the Ukraine war is going. Firstly, I think the wall of attrition Ukraine is waging against Russia, it's not working fine for Ukraine because as of now, I think Ukraine has lost over 1.3 million soldiers and fighters, including lost and unfounded, those that got lost with those that was also killed and their bodies not found. You know, a lot has been going on the Ukrainian side. Even in the Russian side, it has never been easy. You know, Ukraine has lost a lot. I think a few days ago, they lost over 300 million in arms because Russia FPV drones took down Ukrainian elite fighters in a helicopter, and the elite helicopter team didn't return back to base and they were assumed dead. And also the S-300, the HIMARS rockets were taken out by the Russians. And again, the Russians have been consistent on what they want before they could agree to a peace deal. The peace deal includes the total withdrawal of the Donbass, and Ukraine should have nothing less than 80,000 soldiers. You know, for me, I think it's wrong and it's inappropriate for Ukraine not to accept the peace deal of 2022 and to fight on the war. It was a strategic mistake for Ukraine because right now Ukraine is very, very weak, and they keep asking for weapons and weapons and weapons, and most of the weapons the Russians are taking them out even before they are brought into service. You know, so I think the Ukrainian president and the European leaders need to take a stance on how this peace is going to be, because clearly Zelensky has said multiple times that he's not going to cede any land to Ukraine. That no matter what, he's not going to cede any land to Ukraine, and that is not a good fit to the Russians. It tells the Russians, "Oh, you still want a war, and so let's go on." That's what it's saying indirectly. So today we'll be listening to David Davis, one of my best war analysts in the United States. So today we'll be listening to him on what he has to say about the war of attrition. So thank you guys. Let's watch together.
Too often we focus on this battle or this outcome or this city, etc., like that's going to make or break the war. Somehow, if the Ukraine side can defend against Pokrovsk, for example, if they can hold out there, then somehow that can change the tide of the war. Or in Kharkova, for example, that reservoir that's near Pokrovsk, if they can hold out there, then fill in the blank, something positive. None of that's true. This is a war of attrition. Several months ago, we actually did a whole show on the Royal United Services Institute article by Alex Vershinin, a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel who published this thing called The Attritional Art of War, Lessons from the Russian War on Ukraine. And so that was in March. That was earlier this year that was published. And everything in this thing has just borne out as true as can possibly be. And one of the things that he writes in here, which I think is most important and relevant to this conversation here, is he writes, attritional wars require their own art of war and are fought with force-centric approach, unlike wars of maneuver, which are terrain-focused. They are rooted in massive industrial capacity to enable the replacement of losses, geographical depth to absorb a series of defeats, and technological conditions that prevent rapid ground movement. In attritional wars, military operations are shaped by a state's ability to replace losses and generate new formations, not tactical and operational maneuvers. The side that accepts the attritional nature of war and focuses on destroying the enemy forces rather than gaining terrain is most likely to win. Now, when you take that template, that lens, and you look at this war, and you look at even just the last few months of it, Russia is absolutely following that path. Their industrial capacity is off the charts. The Ukrainian industrial capacity is limping and it's on life support. One of the reasons why you see every few days or a week or two, Russia launches this large missile or drone barrage throughout the Ukrainian countryside, hitting energy systems. Because if you don't have electricity, if you don't have heat, then you can't generate capacity. If there's a factory that's identified, the factory gets burned down. Those are happening all. It has been for the better part of 2 years now. It's been a methodical, just relentless drive, which, and to their credit, the Ukrainian side has been amazing in how they still find ways around some of that with generated power or diversion of other resources, et cetera. But the best they can do is just inch along, and they cannot keep up and never will even match the Russian side, much less ever outdo it, even with all of what's going on in the West. So on that capacity, Russia is off the charts doing better. They also are focused on manpower. And to reinforce on that side of the equation, my comment that it's men, not machines, not money. You have to have machines and money, but without the men, it's not going to work. And that's really what I want to show you. That's part of the equation that almost nobody in the West pays attention to, because if anything even sounds like it's positive for the Russian side, we just ignore it. Well, the danger in doing that, one of many, is if you don't know what your opponent is doing, then you don't know why, I argue so vehemently, that the war is already decided. It's already over. It's just a matter of how big the final tally in the bill is going to be for the Ukraine side. Now, I've just shown you a number of videos and newspaper reports about the destroying and the crumbling morale, about the physical movements on the battlefield to the west. Everything's going against them. But let's look at the other half of that. So there, another friend of our show, Alex from History Legends, we've had on several times, hopefully have him on soon as well, has published a piece. And by the way, the link to this full episode, which I strongly recommend you watching, is in the description of this video here. It was just published this morning. It's brand new. And in this, he lays out how the Russians are able to recruit, not force mobilize people. And listen, I'm going to show you just a very small portion of the beginning of his video here. And he's going to explain some of the more important things. And then I'll explain on the backside how important they really are.
My friends, in a war of attrition like the one we can see in Ukraine, manpower is key. And it seems Russia is getting the upper hand. But this time without having to resort to mobilization. All the new soldiers are volunteers. Here from the Defense Post. Russian army's tempting offers paying off as recruitment surges sixfold. Or here, Putin says Russia recruited more than 430,000 to army this year. Russia's recruiting 25,000 to 30,000 new soldiers a month.
For the Emperor!
Hurrah! How exactly did Russia manage to grow such a massive army within only a year? How did Russia convince so many men to join the war? The strategy was simple. Get rich while serving your country. All across Russia, from rural areas to busy city centers, there are these massive billboards displaying army recruitment ads lined up one after the other. Even in the most remote areas of Siberia, you will find such leaflets with the bonus payments you will receive as a soldier. And that's without even taking into account the numerous recruitment commercials that were posted online.
That actually had some dramatic music behind it, which we have to cut because otherwise they have copyright issues, whatever. But you can imagine that those commercials are showing in Russia. And listen, one of the things that Alex points out in the other parts of that video that we want you to recommend you go and watch it, he points out how the financial resources of the Russian state are what's allowing this. There's a combination of several things going on here. Is that Russia historically, as I've pointed out several times, they were invaded from the West by Napoleon 2 centuries ago. They were last century, they were invaded from the West by Adolf Hitler. And so now then you have here NATO coming right up to the border. And as we brag all the time, 50 nations are supporting Ukraine against Russia in a war right up to the border, and now even across the border into Russia. So that automatically gets to the cultural identity, the cultural fear that the Russians have of the West. And so that's why I so want to, just pound on the desk to show people that if you think the Russians are going to get tired of this war, then you've been listening to Western propaganda that says, oh, they'll just get tired of it, just like the U.S. did in Vietnam. We're not talking about something on the other side of the world. We're talking about something that is now in your country and across the borders elsewhere. So it is an existential issue inside their country. They will never stop fighting. So just the patriotism alone is a big motivation for them to see this is a war we can't lose. So that's important. But then you're talking about the financial issue as well. And the amounts of money that they're being offering here, and Alex, he shows this map of Russia and where the recruits are coming from, and then he overlays that with another map that shows the economic conditions of the people of Russia, and some of the more poor areas are the ones that provide the most soldiers. Not surprisingly, because when they can, the Russian side can offer for a year contract the equivalent of 6 times the average living wage in some of these areas, 6 times. And then a lot of the benefits that go with it that are way beyond what even the monetary situations are. They're doing things like taking care of their family members back home. They're giving them declined or reduced costs for public transportation, for example. They're giving them access to medical care, et cetera, much like the U.S. Army does for dependents back home. They're doing all of these things. The dependents back home have places to go. And that's actually a Ukraine recruitment ad there. Oddly enough, that's what they're trying to appeal to, which obviously is not working. But the Russian side, though, they continue to take care of their people. They take care of the troops on the front line. They give them training before they go. They give them, in many cases, 6 months of training, and then they ease them into easier parts of the front first. They replace them when troops get worn out on the front. They replace them and give them rest and recuperation. They do all the things that a modern army does that succeeds. And one of the for some of the troops in there, they said the equivalent, if you compare apples to apples in the cost of living, et cetera, a U.S. Army trooper, a private, for example, can get, I think it's like $25,000 base salary plus all the benefits in here. Well, for the Russia, the equivalent buying power is just like, say, give a guy $190,000 if you want to compare that to what you would make in the U.S. So just imagine if you and an American or a Western European were said, hey, how about $190,000 for a young recruit to come in and we'll even take care of your family, and there's money to be paid if anything happens to you, et cetera. On top of some motivation and morale and patriotism issues, that's a pretty big incentive. Ergo, even with all of the losses the Russian side has been suffering, and by the accounts of Mediazona, that number is about 85,000 dead Russians as of the 17th of December, which is a monstrous total. It's hard to fathom. Just as a comparison, the U.S. loss, I think, is 54,000 in the entire Vietnam War. And these guys have doubled that, basically, or come close to it. And then you add on all the wounded on top of that. There's always this caricature that the West likes to say it's 700,000. That's not, you can't, there's no evidence that that's true. But just stick with the truth, because the truth is enormous. That is a huge loss. And yet they keep getting more and more troops to sign up, to the tune of 430,000. So far, the Russians got in calendar year 2024, 430,000 troops had joined the army. By comparison, the U.S. Army is nearly that figure. It's like 452,000. Can you imagine that? The entire size of the all active duty forces of the U.S. Army are about equivalent to what Russia got this year. That's why that the total number of active forces in Russia now is going to be somewhere around 1.5 million as of the 31st of this month. 1.5 million. So while the Ukraine side is being ground to dust, while its territory is being shrunk, while its cities are being destroyed, the Russian side is growing its armed forces. It's getting bigger and stronger. Now, one of the objectives that we foolishly set for ourselves at the beginning, rather arrogantly, is that we were supporting this war because it would weaken Russia. Do they sound weakened? We tried to destroy their economy. And instead, their economy is doing better than most in the Western Europe. It does have some weak signs. There's lots of inflation. They do have some problems, which Putin admitted a couple of days ago. But don't get any heart for that, because believe me, historically, the Russians can suffer a lot. And as a nation, they have not suffered at all, because while the Ukraine side here is their own country is burning, and many of these people, they can't even use some of the money that their family, because number one, they're not taken care of. Number two, because so much power is outage, they have a terrible quality of life, even in the other parts of the country that are not directly in the front lines. It's the opposite in Russia. They're continuing to go on in really good situation for the most part. There are obviously plenty of poor areas in Russia as well. But by and large, the Russian side, the economy is doing well. It's doing adequate and strong in some regards here. But it will be able to go on for a long time. If you need any more evidence, just look at the fact that they have this cash to give to all these guys. And this is not just promises. They deliver on it. Otherwise, they wouldn't continue to get recruit when these guys go back. So that shows you that everywhere you want to look, that Alex Vershinin article from Royal United Services Institute is spot on and is playing out exactly like he said. It is a war of attrition. And I've often lamented on here in uncertainty and really not clear on why the Russians have never chosen to bring a hammer down. And apparently they've got, several 100,000 troops in reserve that they have not even used yet, as to why they didn't, push hard on some of these weakened lines to bring this thing to an end closer. They got their own reasons. I don't know. But what I can tell you is, and observe on a daily basis, is that they can just keep going as they are without any change, without any big arrow movements. And eventually the death toll will finally get to a point that the army literally just ceases to exist, because, as Alex Vershinin pointed out there, the focus is on the destruction of the enemy armed forces, not so much on territory. If you do the former, knock out their armed forces, then the territory will take care of itself.